Hello summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides video. I'm Saskio and today we're going to be talking about some pretty interesting changes we're going to be seeing on some champs on patch 10.22. These aren't just your average buffs or nerfs, they are complete adjustments to how these abilities work. This also isn't the full list of champs being buffed and nerfed, but these are some of the biggest changes being made, so we decided to make a video on it. We'll be releasing a full video covering all the changes in detail next week, so make sure to smash the sub button to stay notified. But before we get into the video, I'd like to recommend you to visit us at ProGuides.com. We have the best roster of coaches, top tier live classes from instructors like Mike Young and Zyrene, and courses covering a variety of roles and champs from your favorite pro players, like Doublelift. Personally, I highly recommend our VOD review feature. The way it works is you send in a replay file, and the coach sends you back a fully reviewed VOD. It's a super convenient option that saves you some time, so give it a try. Now without further ado, let's get started. So we'll start off with the most interesting of these changes. Annie's E will no longer give damage reduction. Instead, it will shield for 40 to 240 with an additional 40% AP scaling. The mana cost is being doubled from 20 to 40, but the really big change is that it can now be casted on allies up to 800 units away. What does this mean for Annie? Well, the target of these changes is to open up Annie's support, but with such a big AP ratio on the shield, and no mention of the damage reflection being taken off, it just seems like it'll be a really big buff to Annie mid lane. I'm sure Annie's support will also come back into style, or at least be more viable, but when you have a 700 AP Annie mid, that shield is fat, and that Thornmail hurts. So just imagine it on a Hecarim charging into the enemy team. The next champ up for some changes is Braum. His passive explosion is having its max HP base damage go from 12 to 16% base plus 1.5% per 100 AP scaling to 10 to 14% plus 2% per 100 AP. This change is simple and is aimed at weakening the baseline power in his passive, but making it much stronger once you get to that late game full AP build. His E now spreads always, without the prerequisite of having the Blaze debuff on your targets. E's spread range is being lowered from 375 to 300, but if the target is already a Blaze, the range is doubled to 600. To put that into perspective, that's Ashe's auto attack range. This is a pretty big change. When it comes to wave clearing with Brand, you want to use your W on targets that are already ablaze, since it does bonus damage. This means you have to use Q first to get Blaze on a single minion, E to spread it, and then W to finish off the wave. With this change, you can just group up the minions and do the job with a simple E-W combo. This, along with the passive buff, are targeted at making Brand much stronger as a mid laner. And lastly, Brand's ult can now bounce off Brand himself. For those times when you're bursting down a single target, this is huge. This is also in line with the previous changes being aimed at mid lane Brand, but it also applies to Brand's support. Whether it be in lane phase against a single foe or not, this is huge for getting off 3 spell procs on your passive. Even if you miss 2 of your basic abilities, if you're fighting at close range, you can just bounce your ult off yourself for some huge damage. With Brand's tankier build already helping him survive their burst, this change makes Brand a somewhat decent counter to assassins in mid. Now let's look at the changes Nasus is getting. His ult's bonus resists are going from 15 to 55, up to 40 to 70, but will no longer gain extra resistances per second. So even with his ult going till max duration, at rank 1, that's a buff from 30 to 40, and it's all available the second you press R. On live, when you're dealing with lane bullies like Renekton, Garen, or Rumble, you can't really afford to wait 15 seconds for a ramp up. At rank 3, you do get more stats up front, but after 5 seconds of ulting, it's less effective. But being that Nasus is most vulnerable in the early game, that trade-off is super worth it, and may even put Nasus up a tier or 2. Only time will tell, but make sure you're subbed to see if he ends up making the cut for any of our meta videos. Ashe's change is pretty simple, with her W going from 9 arrows to 7 to 11, scaling with rank. This just means she's less likely to hit every minion and poke her enemy laners early, but with it equalizing at rank 3, and even surpassing its strength on live at rank 4 and 5. This type of change is nice, and I wish there were more abilities that had scaling like this, rather than the same old increased damage and lower cooldown that most abilities have. And the last change on the list pertains to Jinx. E-traps now deal full damage immediately instead of over 1.5 seconds. I don't think this change is really aimed at buffing or nerfing Jinx, but it is more in line with the targets of modernization and satisfaction that Mark Yetter tweeted about. But this could technically be a slight nerf to Jinx, because her Get Excited passive isn't technically just takedowns, but rather champs being damaged by Jinx in the last 3 seconds. The damage from her chompers going from a damage over time effect to all of the damage being up front means that there may be a fringe case where she doesn't get excited off of an enemy dying. Say an enemy flashes away and is killed by someone other than Jinx exactly 4 seconds after hitting her flame chompers. In that case, she wouldn't be getting her passive, where with the way it works now, she would. Again, this would be a very rare occurrence, and it does make a lot more sense for a grenade's explosive damage to be all up front, and not a damage over time effect as if it were being burned by flames. So I can see why it's happening. So what do you make of all these changes? Do you think Annie's support is coming back with this, or does it just make Annie stronger? Is Brand viable as a mid now, or just more annoying as a support? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and remember, like I mentioned before, these are just the confirmed champions getting changes so far. We'll have a full video next week in our 10.22 patch preview, so be sure to sub and stay alert to be notified. I can't wait to see you guys back at the next video, but until then, good luck on the Rift, stay safe, and wash those hands.